Okay, welcome to our best practices webinar about successful strategies for acquiring clients. I'm Linda Popke. I'm here with Lisa Anderson and our speaker, Jennifer Vessels. We're thrilled to have her with us. Jennifer is the CEO of Next Step, and she brings over 30 years of proven experience driving successful business growth for such growth organizations as Adobe, Cisco, Google, Tandberg, Lilly, Opera, Core Media, and many others in the technology, life sciences, services, logistics, consumer, and sustainability companies. So I think that pretty much covers just about everything. Before she founded Next Step in 1998, she led channel development, marketing, education, and sales operations for Triad Systems, DataTrack, and Ungerman Bass, which was a Tandem subsidiary. So we're here today with Jennifer. She's going to tell us about successful strategies for acquiring clients. And I just want to let everyone know that we are recording this and a number of people will be watching and listening on the archive. But for those of you who are here in person, you are muted. If you have a question, please either use the Q&A or the chat button, and Lisa and I will monitor that, and we will feed the questions to Jennifer as they come up. So Jennifer, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Perfect, thank you. And it is definitely an honor and a pleasure to be here. As Linda said, I have a long history in sales, and it is one of the things that I feel very passionate about, and delighted to be able to share with other consultants here some of the strategies that I've personally used and a lot of what we teach our clients within Next Step, where we help companies to grow. The objectives for this afternoon are to really help you understand what sales is all about and how that it's very similar in many ways to consulting. A good salesperson asks good questions. They build a relationship. They get to understand the needs of their potential clients. And in doing that, create a sense of urgency and a sense of demand for their services. And we will also talk about how you can easily transition from sales to consulting and actually doing the project through a concept and a process called engagement planning, i.e. tying the beginning of your engagement directly into the end of the sales process. In going forward, I just want to take a minute and recognize that when the word sales comes up, for a lot of people, it creates concern. And for some people, they have that old perception of a salesperson is out there pushing something. The used car salesperson that's trying to scheme or scam or convince somebody to do something. And that really is a old style perspective of sales being pushing. I have something and I want to give it to you. I want to take money from you. Effective sales, and what we call value sales, similar to value consulting, is all about creating demand and interest. So it becomes a pull strategy, i.e. the customer, potential client, desires to have your services. You have something of value. You have skills in accounting or finance or marketing or operations or project management. You have something of value. And ideally, your customer will recognize you have value and they will pull you into their organization, asking you to help them with a problem versus you pushing yourself saying, buy my service, sign me up, and engage me. Really, today, selling is going from that pushing to solving, really solving problems. And that's where, in many respects, we as consultants actually have a huge advantage as a salesperson. Because ultimately, selling, just like consulting, is all about meeting needs. And in a value sales process, the customer buying, saying yes, engaging you, signing off on that PO, that customer buying process really starts with that customer client recognizing I have a need, and Linda, Lisa, John, that person can meet my need, solve my problem with the skills and capabilities that they bring to the table. So sales first starts with understanding needs. And ideally, the bigger the need, the greater the likelihood that that client will engage you. And that need ideally is something that is buried in the client's mind and in their heart and in their stomach. So they really recognize that you can solve a problem and they need your service. That is in exchange for they want. People buy and engage consultants because the need and the pain is great. Sometimes it's because they want, but ideally, to close more business more quickly, you start with a need. And I'll get a little further into how you actually build the understanding of that need and create the largeness and the scope of the need in just a few moments. However, there are a few other things that go into a successful sales process. The customer, the client, the person you're speaking with, needs to actually have the authority in order to engage you. And that authority may be the decision-making power, it may be the budget, it may be the scope of responsibility. And we'll talk a bit about how you can qualify, is this person who has a need, who really likes you and really wants to work with you, is that person in a position of authority where they really can engage you and engage you in a reasonably quick, efficient, and effective manner. And that also can tie to, do they have the budget? And do they understand that using that budget to acquire your valuable service to solve their problem is of value and something that they are willing and able to go to bat for, to defend and to stand up and say, I really need to bring this person in and I need to spend this $10,000 in order to solve my problem, because my problem is actually costing me $30,000. So it's a better use of money for us to solve it up front. And the timing. Timing also goes hand in hand with a buying process. The vast majority of losses of business for a consultant, and really in any service business, the vast majority of lost deals that you start out having conversations, you create a need, you send a proposal and nothing happens. The vast majority of those losses come because timing wasn't right, or there wasn't a clear buying process to do something now. Curious if anybody has heard or reflected on the concern that I've often heard from clients when I had not confirmed these two things, and that is, this all sounds really good and wonderful, but just not sure if we can move forward right now. Let's come back and revisit it.
Yep. There's not a sense of urgency, a sense of it has to happen right away.
Exactly. It's this is great and wonderful, and one day we'll do it. I promise.
Yep.
I'll hang on to your proposal.
Totally. It does come up for me too. So you're absolutely right. You have to make it compelling somehow.
You really do. And some of that is making the need really big, so they realize, if I wait, this is only going to get worse, and qualify they have the authority to do something, and there is a budget, but then tie that to the timing. That need is going to really explode in another 2 months unless you solve it. Now let's talk about what you need to do internally, what other approvals you need to get, how you can find budget in a different department, because the timing of the need is critical. So these are all elements that are really core to a successful sales process. The need, the authority, the budget, the timing, and recognizing by acquiring the services, the capabilities of this person, that's really going to help me solve a problem and drive the incentive to move forward. Hi, Clifton, welcome. Let's talk a little bit more about those needs. The needs typically fall into 3 different categories. And the specifics vary whether you're selling accounting services or project management, but generally a consultant either fixes a functional problem, make it more efficient, make it easier, solve the concern of productivity, create a new way of doing things to make the job easier. Those can be considered functional needs. Often you can create a bigger need and a stronger demand and pull for your services if you can discover not only functional needs, but also financial needs. If you're offering project management services, yes, you're going to help that project get done more efficiently, increase the effectiveness, maybe reduce the time to market, create new materials. That's all good and wonderful functionally. And chances are the potential client you're talking to may really want and need to have those capabilities done. It's going to make their job easier. If, however, you can use open-ended questions and begin to discover some financial needs that complement that functional requirement. How is this project and the greater efficiency of the project, how is that going to help the profitability of this project? Is it going to create more revenue? Will it save employment cost? Ideally, when you're in that sales process, you can identify ways you're going to make that buyer's job easier, but also ways in doing so you're going to save the company money, make the company money, and maybe even touch on how you're going to help that decision maker receive a nice bonus, achieve his incentives in order to help them personally achieve financial success. Which also ties to the third type of need, and that is the emotional aspect. By engaging you, is your decision maker's life going to be happier? Are they going to sleep better at night? Are they going to enjoy working with you? We as human beings, and all decision makers in all companies are human beings, at least so far. There will be AI and robotics in probably the not too distant future. But as long as the human beings are making the decisions, I would suggest that at least a third of your thinking about the sales process should be around the emotional connection you build with that potential buyer and how strongly they feel that you're going to make their life better. So in essence, in a sales process, as a good consultant, you're asking questions, you're exploring, and you're building a relationship around how is this going to help the person's job? How is it going to help their company financially? And how is it going to help them emotionally in order to encourage that person to jump out of their comfort zone a bit and pull you and your great services into their environment and pull you through a decision process in order to reach that ultimate goal, which is engagement and closed business. Any questions coming up so far?
Well, someone commented that, when we were talking about whether they really, when they put us off, and Linda and I responded, she said that she wonders why they wasted her time, but she didn't ensure that they needed her now, like right then. And so it made me think, do you think emphasizing, I don't know, any of these benefits you're talking about can compel them to change that, or what have you found to be successful from that point of view?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. Of course, every situation is different, but ideally to reduce the chance of it becoming we never made a decision, ideally you've identified at least something in each of these categories. You're going to make the job easier. It's going to create better productivity. It's going to get the product out more quickly. The basic level, that almost always has to be there. But ideally, there is some aspect where you can tie it to financial value.
Can I ask a question? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, please.
I have found that sometimes that it can get stalled because the buyer or the organization is unclear in their own buying process. So is there anything we can do in the pre-qualification process of this to prevent us from getting too far down the road to realize, where the buyer is at and how can we help them?
Yeah, it's a great question, Clifton. And the easy answer is yes, in that the earliest possible in your first conversation with that potential buyer, you really start to suss out what is the impact of this problem, need, desire that you have to engage the consultant. Why are you, Mr. Buyer, reaching out looking for consulting services? There's a problem there. What is the impact of that? And ideally, if you can, in that process, identify a financial impact, that can progress the process more quickly in that it removes a typical barrier, which is we don't have budget. This is all good and wonderful, and yes, we really want to use you. We know that you can make this project sing, but we don't have budget. And many times when a buyer says, we don't have budget, or we don't have it right now, or we've just got to wait till the next quarter, many times they're in that mode of seeing this as a cost versus this is an investment that we need to make, because not making the investment is going to have a negative financial impact.
Very, very true. I find that it certainly helps to compel, like you said, if you can show a return on investment, it can go a long way.
And one of the best ways to get to that is really being a good consultant and probing on the why is this a problem today? How is this going to play out in another 1 year? What will the impact of this be on the revenue? And going as deep as possible in understanding that up front before you jump to, oh, I've got a great way that we could solve this for you right now. It's a little bit of patience of really building that need.
So Bill, I hear you saying building the relationship and building the need, like why are they pursuing this topic, and why are they coming to you?
Exactly. And it kind of goes back to that pushing versus pulling. The traditional way is, as a consultant, you get somebody that calls and says, hey, I've heard you do really, really good work in marketing, and I would love to engage you, and we need you to write a newsletter and all this good stuff. The average person starts to hear that, and your ego kind of gets pumped, and you're ready to jump in. Yeah, I'm really good at that. I can't wait. How soon can we get started? You've kind of jumped immediately into the functional versus taking that step back to say, well, why do you think you need a newsletter? How is that going to help your business? What's going to be the impact if you don't do this? The longer you can hold back before you jump in to push, I can do that. The longer you hold back, the more likely they will pull you in at the right time. One of the tools that I have used personally, and something that we leverage in working with our clients within Next Step, is what can be called need-based demand creation, or some of you may have seen the concept in the past of SPIN, S-P-I-N, and there's a book by Rackman that goes into a lot of detail on spin selling. And a lot of the fundamental concepts of that can be very highly applicable and successful in the sales process. And in essence, what spin is starting the sales process by a thorough, deep understanding of the current situation. What is this buyer, this company, what is their current situation, and why are they interested in a consultant? What is driving that need? And by understanding the current situation, you begin to identify a problem in their business that could become that big need that you can solve, and you want to encourage them to pull you in to solve their big need from this problem. Then getting into open questions around how this would impact them long-term, which touches on the financial impact to the company, impact to the person, and then the final step to paint the panacea and the perfect utopia where the problem is solved, the impact is minimized, and this decision maker looks like the hero. That's the emotional element. By walking slowly through that process, starting with deep dive on what's driving the problem, where is the biggest part of that problem and the financial impact, you begin to create in that buyer that really strong desire of, I need to solve this, and Clifton is the guy that can do it for me and make me into a hero. Once you've created that perspective, assuming that person has budget, authority, and there's a known decision process for bringing in consultants in his or her company, they can break through a lot of barriers to find the budget and bring you in.
So Jennifer, I have a question. because I think most of us go through this at least somewhat, maybe not as thoroughly as we should. But one of the things that I find is you get through this, they identify the need, they see there's something on, and then sometimes it's like, well, maybe we'll do it inside. Maybe we'll have an internal person do it, or maybe we'll put it off to next quarter, or maybe we'll think about who else we might bring in. So how do we go from this to actually getting the deal closed? I know you're probably going to talk about this.
Yep, definitely going to talk about it. And let me go through a couple of examples and come back to me if I haven't answered that. So it really does start with open-ended questions initially, and I would suggest, where possible, as much of this is done interactively versus let's just email back and forth, because you really want, in that initial set of situation questions and understanding, you want to build a relationship, because that's a part of it, that you're building that emotional connection to, I want to solve the problem, but gosh, I really want to work with Linda now. So as much open-ended, open dialogue, delving in kinds of questions to build the relationship and to demonstrate your good consulting skills in really fully understanding the problem. Perfect world, 1 to 2 meetings would really be around, I need to get a lay of the land and see what it is you're currently doing to then better understand what you need from me to enhance that. And in doing that is really where you're looking for the what would happen if. So in my case, if I were going into a company, let's say it's a food packaging company, and they say, we really want a new sales process, we have some new products coming out, and we want to learn how we can go into new markets. I would do all of that. What are you currently doing? What are you expecting the new products to be like? What's worked in the past? And then I would jump to, so you've got this new product coming out. What would happen to your current sales if that product is delayed? That kind of question I might get from the customer. Well, that would be a real problem, because actually we're releasing this new product because our current sales have really turned down in the last year. So we're kind of banking everything on this new product. Ooh, okay. So that increases the strategic nature of this new product. That's a sign there's a problem here. And I might continue to probe to see, what if they've got downcreasing sales? What if a couple of large customers left as well? Product delayed, 2 customers leave. That could be 50% of their revenue is not met over the next quarter. So by taking 1 or 2 extra meetings or phone calls to really delve into understanding why they want a new sales process for a new product line, what could go wrong, I've begun to build now a bigger issue through questions in the relationship, so that when they called saying, we want a new sales process for our new product, that was a want. Once we've delved into, we really must have a new sales process for our new product because our revenue is going down, we've now started to create more of a need and a recognition that there is a potential risk factor if the new product is delayed. Even if the product is delayed, They still have a sales problem. So in a case of this nature, if they called saying, we need a new sales process for our new product, had I jumped in saying, here's what we can do, let's get started, it's all great and wonderful, and then they found, oh, the project and the product is being delayed, I might have gotten that next phone call saying, no, that great sales process we talked about you all starting to implement in December, let's talk again in March because our new product is delayed. We'll come back to it then. But if I have taken the time to really delve into why the sales process is a big issue with or without this new product, then that could be a way of mitigating the delay in starting the consulting project until the new product comes out. You want to get as far into the organization as possible. That's one way in endeavoring that. So asking as many situation, then problem questions, but the real key to moving it forward with efficiency often is building up that problem to the impact. So in this example, okay, Mr. Prospect, you need a new sales process for your new product. We've ascertained there is a chance that that new product could be delayed. But in the meantime, you've still got the problem of your sales are declining and you're kind of at risk. If you lost 1 or 2 customers, you could be at 50% of your plan for this year. That seems like that could have a pretty big impact on whether the company is going to meet its overall revenue target with or without the new product. And if the company doesn't meet its revenue target, how's that going to impact the profitability? What would that mean to your bonus? How's that going to make you look if you're responsible for this new product and it's delayed and revenue goes down? Create a bigger demand.
So it sounds like you're saying that you want to really dig deep into the impact so that we can get so that the client sees the value that we're going to bring as a consultant is what it sounds like you're saying. And you're also, it sounds like you're also saying attribute that to the, not just the impact to them or to the company, but also to their career, that type of thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if that person starts to recognize, you know, this really is a big problem and it could impact me, you're touching on that emotional side. And generally, in most companies, when a person that has authority and has access to decision makers maybe above them, if they really see there's a potential impact to their career, their bonus, the goals of the company, they're more likely to find the budget, find a way to move the project forward than if it's just simply, we want to do this.
True. That's a good point. Like, since you're clearly an expert in sales and have been doing this a long time, what would you say is, do you find that the emotional side of this brings it over the finish line quicker, more often than anything else? Is that what you find? Because that's what we hear, but
yeah, it really is. Because at the end of the day, we are all people, and we know for ourselves that we go to bat, so to speak, and we step up and we reach out and we rattle the chains and we find the budget when it's something that we really feel strongly that we need to do.
Are there things that we can be paying attention to in order to understand what what might appeal to a particular buyer emotionally, or how do we get better at that?
Yeah, that's a big question because, of course, every buyer is different, et cetera. But in general, the things you want to look for is firstly just in that initial relationship building process, whether it's in person, Zoom, whatever it is, do you really feel a connection with that person? Are they open to sharing? Are they leaning in to help you in understanding that current situation?
Well, that's a good point. How can you tell if they're leaning in? Like, what would you look for?
In some ways, their willingness and or desire to really support you in taking the time that you need in order to fully understand their needs.
Right.
I mean, I think we've probably all had that potential customer that called up saying, I really, really think you guys are great and I want to engage you and it's so very important. And here's what we're trying to do. Let me just send you some information and you send me back a proposal. That's very seldom a sign that you have an engaged buyer.
So that's another interesting point then. So really, if people are asking you to do a proposal, it could be a very bad sign.
It could be an extremely bad sign.
So how do we get out of that? Like if they say that, and you know that it's not where you want to take this yet, how do you, is there some way to recover from this?
The best way at that point is number one, always recognize and not insult them and say, happy to provide you a proposal, but so that it's useful to you, I really need to understand a bit more about your current situation, what you're trying to achieve, how my proposal can impact your business, so that when I send you something, it's worth you're taking the time to read it. If they're not willing to have one or two conversations around the situation, the problem, and the impact, I really do question whether they are fully engaged in solving a real problem.
So Jennifer, one of the things Alan Weiss tells us, and I think he's saying the same thing in different words, he says we need to have objectives, measures, and value. Objectives is what they need to do. Measure is how they're going to figure out whether it's successful, and value is what you're talking about the impact. And if you're starting to do this, I've still gone through that process myself, and I'm sure other people have as well, where I think that the client is engaged and I think we're moving forward and they say yes, 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 and whatever, and they're nodding their head, and they do have budget, so we've established that they are a legitimate buyer, and then things sit. You send them the proposal or you're ready to move forward. Well, we like it, but we're not sure right now. We got to wait till next quarter. So how do we kind of know that we really have them engaged as opposed to they sort of look engaged?
Yeah, and one aspect of that, and there's a few parts of it. One is they've leaned in up to this point of what's the problem. Then the last part of that spin process is really building their excitement about the utopia. Are they excited about, won't it be great when? That's when you're both on the same side of the table. We're going to solve this together, Sally. When you get that energy that they are owning the problem, they are owning, you are the one giving them utopia, that has shifted the dialogue. I mean, you literally then are on the same side of the table.
I think this is really important. I think this is where we get stuck. At least personally, I find I get stuck because we're going, okay, but they're not all excited going, yeah, this is great.
Yeah,
so
that's really you got to get them seeing, I've got a real problem over here, and Linda is the only one that can do this for me. I am going to sit on that same side and push through to get her in here quickly.
Can I, Jennifer? I love the spin questions there, and they do tie into some of Alan's 101 questions to ask during any sales discussion. Do you develop your questions? Some of these are going to be objections. Some of these are going to be different type of questions, depending on where they come in the sales process. But do you develop these beforehand in your research, so you're going in prepared with your questioning? Some you have to do, or some you have to do on spot. What is your balance and, I guess, ratio there?
Great question, Clifton. And in general, I would say yes and yes. I mean, you probably would have a set of bank of questions that you feel comfortable with. And we say that in the spin process, you start with the what would happen, how would this impact, and how could. The research part is really around understanding the basics of what could be the situation. So preparing those open questions of what is the productivity rate today? What is your employee turnover? You've got a good base from your research, but you want it coming from them. You never want to go too far with the research to say, I saw that you've got an employee turnover rate of 15%. What do you think about that? You don't want to go that far because you want it coming from them.
But you need enough to get the conversation going and keep it moving. And so, if we look at the situation side and you're just going in the door, is it 10, 15 questions you should have really up your sleeve just to make sure there's a flow to the meeting instead of it stalls?
Ideally, you've done enough research to be able to kind of get it down to about 4 to 5 initial questions. I want to learn about employee turnover. I want to see what they're doing on engagement. I need to understand what the productivity is. But then after that level is where you really show your skills as a consultant of, we talked about that employee productivity. Help me to understand what that really looks like.
Okay, so now you're drilling down on those. Once you get the broad areas, you're drilling down on each of those areas to go further.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
And to be really honest, one of the hardest challenges I find is, having used this method a few times, it's hard for me to not pre-plan too much. Now, if I get too far ahead thinking, I believe the problem is over here, I might actually miss the bigger problem is over here. So it's kind of balancing that patience of being prepared and being knowledgeable, but being a good open-ended, good questioner, good prober to really get as deep as possible, because that problem's got to come from them, not from your head. It's got to come from inside that prospect.
Jennifer, I just want to give you a heads up. We've got about 15 minutes left. So
Perfect.
Just so you can pace yourself.
Thank you for that. Couple things I do want to just kind of jump back to that's within this that I think we've started to touch on, and that is it starts with the need. But as you have these conversations, and ideally before you send the proposal, you would have at least 2 to 3 conversations with that decision maker. And as you're doing so, you're looking for the authority. Can they actually make the decision? And if the answer is no, or it is yes up to a certain level, who else do you need to be involving in that process? Because you and Sally could be convinced that you could go out and create beautiful utopia. But if Sally only has this much budget and you need that much, you need to balance that. So as you're using the spin type questions and building this big need, you're also asking questions to validate this person's authority. And it could be around, how have you brought in other consultants? And if you get the answer of, I don't think we've ever used a consultant before in the last 50 years of history in our business, that's getting kind of scary. So if you've never used consultants before, let's talk about what is the process. Let's talk about how many levels of approval you might need. Do they need to W-2 it? All of these other questions. Having that conversation early in the process can be a factor in preventing the, oh, this is all great and wonderful, but we're going to really need to do it in-house because our CEO has a philosophy to never use a consultant. You've just invested now 3 months in getting to know Sally, and here you've lost the project. So number one, are they used to using consultants? What kind of requirements, details, processes, documentation are they going to need? The sooner you can understand that up front, the better.
So in a way, if they use consultants frequently, even if there's other consultants in there, that's a good sign because they see the value.
Absolutely.
It can be a good way to as far as like acquiring clients, and obviously we all want more of them. It could be that we target those that do have other consultants there, even though that might seem counterintuitive, it sounds like.
Yeah, in many respects, the more, and this is probably the advantage of consulting collaboratoriums, if you will, the more you can go into a company that is used to working with outside expertise, absolutely the better. And I think we've all had those situations where we invested time and energy in the relationship with person A, call it Sally, that despite how much that person said, I am the decision maker, I have the authority, it's my budget, we found out on the back end side, they really didn't have that budget. They really needed to go to somebody else. So the earlier in the process, you can start to ask questions about, who else should we involve? Mr. Prospect, you've identified you've got this new product that you need a new sales process for. What other departments might have something to say about that? Have you involved the marketing department? Should we go talk to that person? Maybe they have opinion. So the broader you can get the purveyance of understanding of the value that you can bring, not just with this one person or department, the greater the chance you can find a way to anchor the authority. And with the decision maker who is leaning into the process, that sees you can add value, that recognizes I've got a problem and this person can really help me build that utopia, they will be willing and open to working with you on these questions. If it's the kind of decision maker who has simply been told, go get a proposal from a consultant for this project so we know how much we should pay our internal person to do it, they won't engage with you on these topics.
So in a sense, getting back to an original question that was asked earlier, you're educating the buyer and I guess helping them to develop their own process to hopefully, give you the work.
Exactly. And in doing that, you're starting to shift that mindset from cost for a consultant to this person is actually going to help our company achieve financial results, more revenue, greater margin, reduced costs, financial benefit, and shifting the mindset to we need to invest consulting fees. We need to invest time to bring him or her up to speed. I believe in the utopia that Lisa has convinced me she can bring me. and I'm willing to put my reputation on the line in order to really bring her into the organization. Those are all investments that that decision maker needs to make. Finding the budget, the time, and that risk of reputation to bring this person in.
We found, or I've seen that if you get to this point where you have a nice return on your project and you have a buyer that's interested and that type of thing, it seems like nothing good can happen with extra time getting added into the schedule. Like only bad things happen. Is there anything that first of all, have you noticed that since you've been doing this forever? And the other thing is are there things that you can say that can help, or say or do, I guess, to get that wrapped up quicker? Because obviously a lot of things go wrong.
You're exactly spot on, Lisa, that you want this as condensed of a time frame as possible. Once you've gotten to this point where you've identified a problem and a need, you're on the same page of creating utopia, the budget is there, you want that thing signed, done, and moving like within seconds, if not days or hours, before somebody changes their mind, loses their job, etc. And a way of doing that is something that we refer to as engagement planning. So you've got this person excited about Lisa is going to solve the problem.
It's as if I knew you were going to say this and I didn't.
It really is, and I don't think we shared this up front. That's why I was kind of as soon as they're excited at that moment, okay, we want to get moving on this. We agree that you're losing revenue. This new product is delayed. What's the decision process to get started right now? Because if we look at it here together, Sally, you're losing revenue. You might lose this customer in the next 2 months, and we're getting close to the end of the year. So we've got to get started here quickly. In order to move our project forward, I'm going to need about a week to get to know the way you work internally. We're going to need a week to define this sales process. We're going to need 2 days to do this. And you want this problem solved by the end of December. We need to get moving quickly. So you actually start to build a checklist and a project plan as the last step of the sales process. When you and the client are on that same page, we're going to solve this together. You're asking, what day do you want to get this solved by? You want it solved by December 30th. We're going to take 2 weeks to implement. We need a week and a half to define. We need a week for me to start learning. So we need this signed and sealed by November 1st to get your problem solved by December 30th. So it's really using that backwards engagement project planning up to signature needs to happen. And that in many cases can be, instead of sending a proposal, you're actually sending an engagement plan.
Very good. Well, I don't know if do you have any other piece? Because I had one last question as well.
This was the final step in the process.
All right. Well, so Liz DeClifford, who says she loves listening to you on the webinar, asked about if you saw any differences to the sales process, or like what we'll need to do next year in 2020 to be successful, or is it pretty much the same?
Oh, that's a big question, Liz. Everything I'm picking up, there is a perception, and this is global as well as in the Bay Area, that 2020 is going to be a more difficult year, that economic times have been good and wonderful, and things may be a-changing. So in that respect, I would say everything we've talked about here today is going to be triply important. Really understanding and building that big problem and need, getting that emotional connection. We're going to solve this together, especially in this difficult year, and tying to a compelling event. You want this problem solved by December 30th, Sally, because we don't know what January 1st is going to mean. The world could change quickly. We need to get moving now quickly here, November 1st. It becomes even more critical.
So what I hear you saying is that the process itself really is the same, but we really need to fine tune our skills so that we can be more focused and just better at the process if we want to be successful, because it's likely to be a little bit harder to acquire clients and close the deals.
That is what I would perceive, and the other part of that is really that in a challenging time, it's more critical than ever that we all qualify and spend that time up front before we put a lot of time and energy into proposals and chasing people. We qualify. Is there really a big need? Do I have somebody that has or can find and bring in the authority that is willing to see this as an investment of budget and understands the timing is critical, that we need to move forward quickly? Our time will be more valuable in 2020 because potentially there's a bigger need. So let's put the focus on the right ones.
Can I add a question? I mean, you're talking about big sales, big needs, but this really applies to all level of sales, whether we're selling to SMEs, to and all the way to large corporates and so forth. Is that correct?
It's 100% correct. And in fact, my experience is sometimes selling the small deal to the SME is equally, if not more difficult than selling the $1 million project to the Ciscos of the world.
It can be very true. And it's really good timing that we're doing this in December, because it seems like the right time to fine tune our skills for
Yes.
2020.
So we're just about out of time, which has been fascinating, and this has been wonderful. And I think, again, this really dovetails into what we've learned from Alan's model. So I want to thank you, Jennifer, for doing this. And this has been very useful. And I want to remind everyone that our January webinar actually ties right into this, because we have Patricia Fripp, who is the master of presentations, and she's going to be talking about how you put together a superstar sales presentation. So we've got all this stuff here, how do you present yourself, etc. And that's going to be Thursday, January 9th. And so I invite you to join us then. And again, we want to thank Jennifer so much for being here with us, and all the folks who've been on the phone and on the webinar from the Pacific Rim area and from elsewhere, and that will be joining us afterwards. Please always let us know what your thoughts are so we can help you and continue to create value. So thank you.
Excellent. And we will be posting this in the SAC members only section of the website, so that we can all keep this in mind as we go to 2020. So.
And on behalf of Australia, thanks for doing it at a decent hour. So.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.